Okay, so number 6, explain metaphors or keywords or quotes. So if you feel that it's really important to have a particular quote in there, explain the quote clearly to your translator before you teach. If you have a metaphor that is key to your teaching, if you have a word that is key to your teaching, make sure that your translator really understands what that key word is, because you might be using it over and over again, and they might be saying something totally different. So I was teaching in Cambodia one time. I had a guy named Radi translating for me, and I had a story that involved a pirate, which in English you go, there was a pirate, and everybody goes, oh, and you can just have a picture in your mind. I know what a pirate looks like. Well, in Khmer, that's not a part of their culture growing up. It's not something that they study. You know, they don't study pirates and Columbus and all of the things that we study in school. And so Radi and I spent probably 10 minutes talking about what a pirate is. I mean, there were pictures, there was a sword. I mean, we had to look at, okay, you remember this movie? That's a pirate. You remember that? Oh, that's a pirate. Oh, okay. And I can't remember if there was even a word for it. There might have been a word, but there was certainly this idea of, I understand when you say pirate, I know what you're talking about. And so I can translate, and it was a big piece of this sort of elaborate story that I was using as an illustration. But it was kind of the key. If you didn't understand the illustration, the whole teaching didn't make any sense. So it's worth saying, okay, do you know what this means? So explain metaphors, keywords, and quotes. That was number 6. Also, avoid sarcasm and rhetorical questions. They don't translate very well. We use rhetorical questions in English all the time, and you're just going to get a direct translation of a rhetorical question, and students will start to answer your question, and that wasn't what you were looking for. Same with sarcasm. We laugh at The Office, we laugh at Parks and Rec, or any sort of TV show. The Western English language thrives on sarcasm. It doesn't translate. So people are going to take it at face value, and one, you'll be embarrassed because you have to re-explain it, and then you're going to make your translator feel embarrassed because they'll feel like, wow, I didn't understand the English and I was trying so hard, and you've unintentionally embarrassed the translator, which is also what you don't want to do. So just avoid, if at all possible, sarcasm and rhetorical questions. Okay, jokes in translation. So some jokes translate, and they're funny. Some jokes, actually a lot of jokes, don't translate because of cultural differences. Jokes are usually related to something that everybody understands about a culture. Blonde jokes are funny in the Western world because somewhere along the lines there's been this stereotypical blonde joke thing, and everybody goes, ha ha ha, we all understand. Well, go to Nigeria, no one's blonde, and they don't understand. It's a joke that doesn't translate. And so you have to be careful to, that's one that, you know what, while I'm getting to know my translator, I might test this joke and see if there's any reaction at all. At dinner time, I might just sort of bring it in. If you really are like, I need a joke to be a part of my teaching because it illustrates a point or something, test it out. If you have to explain it, it's not that funny. And it's probably not going to work.
See if there's a little laughing or if they just want to
So,
see your face.
I have a friend who's from Iceland, and her dad is a pastor in Iceland. And they had a pastor come from America to teach in their church in Iceland, and her dad was translating for him. And as he's translating, he says, oh, he just said a joke in English, but it makes no sense in Icelandic, so just laugh and pretend that you understood. And everybody's like, that's the funniest thing ever. So everybody's laughing in the audience. I mean, quick thinking from her dad. Everybody's laughing, and the pastor thought, everybody got my joke. And he moved on with his teaching. I mean, her dad was very smart and, understood what was happening, but he's just like, it just doesn't make sense in Icelandic. So, just laugh. Genius.
Probably were laughing. I would laugh
Yeah.
if someone said that. Just
Yeah.
because it's
Like he never knew that that's what happened. But that's not always the case when somebody's translating. I actually, when I was in Cambodia on my Titus outreach, I asked, we had actually a guy on our team who was Khmer, and I asked him, what is a Cambodian joke? And so he told me a Cambodian joke. So here you go. This is a Cambodian joke in English. So there are 3 ants on one side of the river. There's a piece of string across the river, and there's 1 ant waiting on the other side of the river. So the first ant crosses over on the piece of string and gets the other side and says to this ant, there's 2 more ants behind me. The second ant crosses over the piece of string, gets the other side and says to this ant, there's 2 more ants behind me. Then the third ant crosses over, gets the other side, says to this ant, there's no more ants behind me. What happened? He lied. If it just makes no sense. That's the joke.
I'm laughing because it's
But they're laughing because he's lying, or that I didn't understand it. But I was like, is that the joke? He goes, yep.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. I still don't get it. But he's like, that's the punchline is he lied.
alright.
And everybody
The
laughs
second
except me.
one, That's so funny. Like, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. But see, that's so there's something culturally that makes that funny. It just didn't translate into English. The same way our English jokes don't translate well into other cultures sometimes. Okay, teaching with a translator. Remember to speak in short sentences. And to say the full sentence. In English, it's possible to break up a sentence into shorter chunks, and you can keep, everybody sort of retains the flow of where the sentence is going. But some languages, so in English, we speak, the cat sat on the mat. So the cat sat on the mat. But in Chinese, or Japanese, excuse me, in Japanese, it's the cat on the mat sat. So if you don't speak the whole sentence, if you said, the cat sat, and waited for translation, it gets very confusing. Because they need to know the where, the cat on the mat sat. They just can't translate it. And so you need to make sure that you finish the sentence. Sometimes we like in English to sort of make use of pauses for dramatic effect. And we pause halfway through a sentence and then we, sort of bring the hook in with, this is, where we were going. You can't do that. You need to say the whole sentence.
I would say the whole thought, because in Russian it's the same thing. They're like, can you finish the thought, please?
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, sorry. So you finish it, and then they actually do it in a lot of different order. Their grammar is also by endings on their words, and so they have to have your whole sentence for them to be able to put the right ending on their words. It's
And
like really hard.
as you learn to speak with a translator, that's a really good point that Anna raises. Some places and some people want just one short sentence, and some people want 3 or 4 sentences because they can translate with context. So you have to almost sort of work with your translator a little bit to figure out, okay, awesome, how much do you want me to speak before I pause it for translation? That's part of the getting to know your translator. That's a really good point, Hannah. Yeah, so in English, we could say something like, can we please try to make it to class on time, because we need to go early to lunch. I mean, you can make, and we all understand where the sentence is going, but it just doesn't translate. Number 9. So number 9 is a little acronym, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
So the easier that you can say it, the easier they can translate it. If it's complicated, that's just where quotes become a big thing. And sometimes quotes, we use quotes, and they're actually difficult to translate. I found a teaching recently that I taught in 2007 in Cambodia, and I looked at some of the quotes I used, and I thought, man, wasted that opportunity. Because it was long, the English was difficult, the grammar was difficult.
I would just paraphrase it in simple.
Yeah.
I did that before. I
Yeah.
would make it a simple, like, there's this quote, and I'm gonna give you the idea of it, and then I,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, no, that's good. Keep it simple. So you see how it's possible. We can get excited, we can have this idea, and we start putting in all of these things that we don't need to put in there. When really what we're trying to say is God requires all believers, especially leaders, to walk in obedience to His commands.
Yeah.
I can translate that. Okay, number 10. Speak to be understood. So keep your pace of speaking slow enough and clear enough to be understood. You need your translator to be able to understand what you're saying. For example, I love to eat chocolate because it always makes me feel at home. No matter where in the world I am, it's important to love the foods that make you feel at home. I'm very excited that we have foods in this country that I love.
Me too.
I know. Actually, it makes the audience tired too.
Yeah, they're trying.
Yeah, makes your audience tired, makes you tired. And
I also like
yeah, it just becomes confusing. You get a lot of, what? Please explain?
Say that over again.
Huh? So something to be aware of is even just your own nervousness. Often when we're nervous, we pick up the pace of our speaking. So have a little bit of self-awareness. Breathe. Take that time while they're translating to take a breath. Watch your pace. Here's a helpful hint. If you're having dinner with your translator, because normally at dinner we speak at probably our most relaxed pace. If you're having dinner, if I'm having dinner with Stephen and Stephen's having trouble understanding me, that's probably a good indicator that he's going to have trouble translating for me tomorrow morning at the pace I'm speaking at. But if I can sit at dinner and Stephen and I can have a conversation where he understands what I'm saying, it's a pretty good indicator that things are going to be okay. So dinner is a good place to just sort of figure out, okay, where are we at here? Number 11, get your translator to repeat questions. So when you're doing a question and answer session with your students, make sure that you get your translator to repeat the question. And occasionally translators will just begin to answer the question for themselves. So if you say, where in Genesis does it talk about Abraham? You're teaching, okay, where do we see about Abraham getting his call from God? And your translator might just say, Genesis 12, back to you. They won't translate the question to the students. And so you can even prep your translator and say, this morning I'm gonna try and have a little bit of dialogue. It's gonna take some time. We're gonna ask some questions. Please just translate for the students. When I say, where in Genesis do we see Abraham getting his call? You translate, where in Genesis do we see Abraham getting his call? Does that make sense? It's otherwise what you get is Genesis 12 or some other answer. Now sometimes too, when you're asking questions, you get an interpretive translation. So what I mean is I might say, what color is Stephen's hair? And the translator will stand here and say, Stephen's hair is brown. So they translate still, but they interpretively translate the answer to your question. I might say, where in Genesis do we see Abraham's call? We see Abraham's call in Genesis chapter 12. So, does that make sense? That's where you need to prep your translator with your questions. Get them to repeat your questions. Yeah, we were teaching in Burma one time. I had a student in the DTS that I was staffing. She was teaching in this church, and every time she asked a question, the translator would answer the question for himself and then just start preaching. I mean, she would ask one question, and then he would translate for about 5 minutes. We had no idea what he was saying, but clearly was not the question that Kimberly was asking. And so, by the time you're up there, and you're in the middle of it, it's a little hard to be like, whoa, 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 stop. So it takes a little bit of work on the front end to say, when I ask a question today, please just translate the question. I'm looking for feedback from the students. I'm looking for interaction. And number 12, your translator can facilitate. Get your translator to help you facilitate the classroom. If you just taught something that's particularly difficult to understand or a topic that might be particularly sensitive, get some help from your translator to help gauge where everybody's at. They're up the front with you. They've seen the reactions of people. You can actually say to your translator, hey, where do you think people are at here? I sort of have, this is maybe where I want to go. What do you think? Have a little bit of an aside with your students. You can even say, I just need to ask the translator something really quick. Everybody just breathe. Get some help from your translator. They're a teacher too. And it helps ensure that your students actually have a full grasp on what you're teaching. Your translator might say something like, actually that was really difficult. Could you explain this a little bit more? Because usually a translator, if somebody's translating for you, they're usually a little bit more experienced in the context that you're in, potentially a pastor or a leader in a school, or they're not just usually someone off the streets. And so if they don't understand, it's likely that your students don't either. So, take that time to get some help facilitating from your translator. I did have one time I was teaching in Burma, and the only person in the town that we were in who spoke English was a Buddhist doctor. And so that was a little odd to preach the gospel, but I thought, well, he needs the gospel too, so here we go. You've got the best English, you get to translate and hear about Jesus. But it made for some challenges with some of the Christian language, some of the words, some of the things where he said, wait, really? He was sort of learning as we went, so that was a little bit different. Your translator will copy you. So number 13, hopefully, every once in a while you get a penguin. Doesn't move very much. You try and help your penguin to flap its flippers.
You're my penguin.
You're my penguin.
Flap
So
your flippers.
your translator will copy you. So in the same way that your students are gonna, that energy of your classroom, the pace of your classroom, if you stand at the front and in a very monotone voice teach about the thing that you're so excited that God has given you to bring to your class, how's your translator going to be? We're so excited that we have this speaker here from America. Snooze me. So the same energy that you bring into your class, that's what your translator is going to feed off and bring in to their translation as well. They're going to copy you. So if you don't move, your translator probably won't move. If you move, if they're a good translator, they're going to move in the same direction that you are. Careful if you change directions quickly, don't bump into your translator. Excuse me, but you're going to see that, especially good translators, they're going to copy you. I was in Europe, it was about 10 years ago. Lauren Cunningham was on a speaking tour, and we were help him do some of the prep work in some of the places that he was teaching, and he spoke for 2 nights in Paris. And the first night, I mean, it didn't matter what Lauren did. This translator was, I mean, penguin. Didn't move at all. And, I mean, Lauren tried so hard. Lauren's a good communicator.
Yeah.
He's got some experience. But man, this guy was... And the whole audience fed off the translator, not off Lauren. So that, remember, your translator is a teacher too. And so they just got this. The second night they had a different translator. I asked somebody else to come in, and he was exactly everything Lauren did, this translator did. Every move that Lauren made, the translator made the same move. And it was a totally different speaking engagement. There was so much more energy, there was so much more excitement. It's like, yeah, man, missed opportunity last night, all because of how the translator moved or didn't move. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're teaching and, you know, day 1 translator does nothing, you can ask the translator, hey, tomorrow when we teach, I'm gonna use some body language, some nonverbals, I'm gonna move my arms around, I'm gonna move around the stage. Could you copy me and do the same thing? They're probably just not aware that they're even doing that. And if you say yeah, then most of them will be like, oh, sure. Didn't know you wanted that. You know, maybe the example they've seen is other translators who just stand and do nothing. It might be one of their first times translating. So people are pretty willing to get on board with something if you ask them. So sometimes you don't know, but your second time around can help. Follow up to that, number 14, use a lot of hand motions. Use a lot of nonverbals. Remember, our language is, Mr. Titus, how many %? Our words. No, our words are
our words.
15%?
Yeah, it's a little higher
Is
than that.
25?
Yeah.
I mean, nonverbals is something like 65, is that 55?
65, 60, up, you can see it up to
About in the
80.
60s, yeah. So our nonverbal communication is huge. So the more, okay, I can say this, I can come close to the audience, I can come away from the audience, I can crouch down, I mean, I can jump in the air. The more you can do to communicate the heart of what you are trying to communicate, the more that is going to get translated. Because nonverbals, for the most part, people understand. Not always, but they're pretty similar. Yeah, so another story from Cambodia. I was teaching one time, and I mean, everything I did. I sat, I knelt, I ran across the stage, I waved my arms. I mean, this guy was on it. Without running into me too, which is fantastic. But it changed the teaching so much. It added the emotion that I was trying to bring into the teaching. He brought into it too.